And we are live. Hello everybody, I'm Tolis Dokianos coming at you from Apex Video Marketing Studio today, the 12th of November, 1500 hours, and I'm very excited to introduce to you my very next guest on this third episode of our series of Team C's live streams, in which my guest and I will be discussing how you can help reduce plastic waste on our fragile planet. I'm here in support of an incredible initiative by two very famous influencers on YouTube. It's called Team C's. It's a campaign whose goal is to raise 30 million United States dollars to rid the planet of 30 million pounds of plastic from rivers, lakes, seas, and oceans around the world, and we aim to do this by year end. So by the 1st of January 2022, we want to have raised 30 million US dollars. And what we're going to do with this money, or what the campaign is going to do with this money, is they've reached out and partnered up with two conservancy organizations. One is Ocean Conservancy and the other one is the Ocean Cleanup. And all donations from the Team C's campaign will be split and donated to these two charities 50-50. This initiative is evidence of what the YouTube community can do and is able to do to help the environment on a global scale. It's a growing community with very, very influential YouTube creators like Mr. Beast and Mark Rober, and there's nothing too small or too big that all of us, all of you, individuals and businesses alike, can do just as long as we do our little part. And I'm doing my little part by having made a very small little donation of $20, but I'm also going to be dedicating my time to bring to you these live streams where I bring on board creators, subject matter experts on sustainability, ocean conservancy, plastic pollutions, and everyday business people who have taken an interest in the environment and who actually take the lead in by taking the lead in doing things that are actually good for the environment. So if you stick around until the very end of this live stream, I'll show you how you can help too, and I want to get straight to it. My guest today is a visionary. He's a dear old friend of mine. We actually went to school together back in Athens, Greece. We worked together on a science project in 5th grade, and I still have very fond memories of that. And like myself, he's a lover of nature, he's a lover of the sea, he's a lover of food, and I'm very, very happy to introduce him to you. And that is none other than my friend, drum roll please. Just a moment, let's pull him up on screen here. There you go, this is my friend, Philip Ammerman. And you know, Philip, apart from being a lover of nature and a lover of seafood and you name it, he's a bon vivant, I must say. He really enjoys a good life. Outside of his free time, Philip is a consultant. He's an entrepreneur and an investment specialist who has advised financial institutions, governments, and enterprises on digital disruption, internationalization, and investment-led growth since 1994. He is a managing partner for Navigator. Philip, throw me a bone here. Give me the name of your company again.
Navigator Consulting Group.
Navigator Consulting Group. Wonderful. It's amazing. Sometimes I get lost in all my notes. And let's just put both of us on screen now. And there we go. Philip, welcome to my live stream. Thank you very much for taking part on what I consider to be a very exciting campaign. You know, admittedly, I haven't really been active in anything that really was environmentally led, anything that has to do with sustainability. And admittedly, I'm also learning all about this as we go through these next few episodes. I've made a conscious decision to embark on this journey, to learn more about it. I want to talk with people like yourselves, subject matter experts as well, to see what it is that we all can do, even the simplest things, as far as I can tell so far. Just let me adjust my hearing aids here. Doing just the simplest of things is something that can make a big difference. And, you know, you've been someone that I've been following on Facebook, apart from us having been friends for such a long time. But I've done my research, and since 2008 on Facebook, you actually led an initiative, always being the trendsetter and leading by doing. You actually had a beach cleanup in Athens, Greece, on the coast of Athens, Greece, at a beach called Skinyas. And I've also taken a liberty of finding some pictures, and actually, you've been doing this for many, many years, and now you're actually based in Cyprus, if I'm not mistaken. So, Philip, tell us a little bit about your story, about your journey, and why something like Team Seas has been something that you are willing to come on board and talk to us about.
Thank you. And thanks a lot for supporting Team Seas. I think it's an amazing initiative, and I really appreciate you taking time. I know how much time you're investing in this, so I think it's a really, really valuable initiative. I think as we move into the future, and kind of, the future is not a defined point in time, but it seems to be a point which is coming more and more rapidly. I think that we see on the one hand tremendous potential. So we see the impact of new technologies, we see digital technology, we see platforms like YouTube, platforms like Facebook bringing us closer together, connecting us with classmates and family members all around the world. But we also see the reverse of the medal. We see the negative impact when technology is used to create something which is, initially positive, for instance, packaging. But the problem is that we only use product packaging for such a limited period of time. And then if we don't dispose of it properly, it winds up as pollution. And the packaging that winds up the sea is among the most, harmful pollution of all, because it not only affects the water and the soil quality, but affects marine life. It can be a fire hazard. And obviously it's something quite ugly and, not something that you really want to be around. So I find that, because we can't really mandate what we want society to do, I feel that personal responsibility is something that we've got to place at the core of what we do and who we are. And I think without personal responsibility and a personal awareness of sustainability and, the planet we live in, but, even just being a good neighbor, we're not going to get very far. In fact, I think the opposite will take place, and I'm afraid that's what we see today when we look at fake news, when we look at this political polarization and extremism, which is affecting us everywhere, from Greece to the United States to basically all the countries in the world.
Yeah.
So my story is, I was born in Greece, in Athens. As you know, we both went to ACS, the American Community Schools there. I grew up in the pre-internet age. We had, no mobile phones. We had no internet. We had some primitive typewriters or computers that we used for homework assignments or basic coding language. But graduated in 1989, went to the States for university, worked in the States, Germany, came back to Greece. And what had changed was we had this tremendous explosion of the consumer economy. So we had the growth of these large retail chains, that are packaging everything that are packaging groceries in plastic bags, or that are relying on a packaging chain where, every product is now basically prepackaged. And so when I would go to a beach like Skinyas, which is a national park, it's this beautiful pine forest set on sandy dunes, basically to the east of Athens, near Marathon, where the battle was fought in 490 BC. I would see tons and tons of garbage. And the problem is that the garbage would be there even though the municipality and the national park had put garbage disposal bins just a few meters away from the shoreline. And because I was kind of tired of, being on the beach and surrounded by garbage, I said, well, okay, can I clean by myself, say a 10 meter by 10 meter patch? And, it wasn't very pleasant, but I would, we would do that. We would see the results, and we would go home. And of course, the next time we come to the beach, it would be there again. The garbage would be omnipresent. So I decided to see how many friends I could get to join in a purely voluntary initiative just to pick up garbage. And picking up garbage is hardly a popular activity. Everyone is busy. Everyone has families. When you're not working 50-hour weeks or 60-hour weeks in your job, you're taking your kids to, ballet class or tennis or soccer classes or whatever. And, no one really has time. But for some reason, the message really resonated. And with the help of companies who volunteered their time, or schools or embassies or environmental organizations, we actually got a group of volunteers who would range from anywhere from 50 to about 100, sometimes 150 people, who would come out on a Sunday morning and spend 2 to 3 hours picking up garbage. And then, all of us just sitting on the beach and enjoying a picnic. And again, purely voluntary. There was no structure. There was no sponsorship. There was no need for finance. We all contributed our own expenses. And this was a great experience because on the one hand, we collected garbage, but on the other hand, we had the sense of empowerment that rather than sitting and complaining about doing something, we were actually doing it. And the results were good for everyone. So I was very happy. I was honored that, people wanted to participate. And this was, as you said, this was back in 2008. I'm very happy to say that initiatives like this have proliferated all over the world. In Cyprus, there are 2 groups which do nothing but cleaning every weekend. It's a pure, both purely voluntary. And you really see the results. You see the results because on the one hand, the beaches and the forests here are clean, or at least cleaner than they used to be in the past. But on the other hand, you see that the sensitivity has grown, particularly with younger people and children. And these are lessons which last with them for the rest of their lives, hopefully. So it's hopefully a lesson they can pass on, to their children. At the end of the day, it doesn't take much to say, look, I'm coming to enjoy a public spot. I'm coming to enjoy the beach, rather than just trashing my sandwich wrappers or my potato chip wrappers or whatever, just, put them in a bag, either dispose of them properly or take them back home and recycle them. It's not a big, it's not a huge burden. And if everyone would just respect their neighbor and the environment just a little bit more, I think we would really, really, really improve the world we live in.
Now, Philip, tell us a little bit about what you do professionally, because you do a lot of traveling, except, of course, during lockdown, which was a very interesting time for all of us. But traveling has been picking up again of late, but prior to lockdown at least, what were your observations on what businesses in your neck of the woods were doing? And do you have any examples of business cases or environmental cases where businesses are actually doing the right thing?
Yeah, I'm happy to say that environmental awareness is growing very, very rapidly in the corporate sector. So I advise companies on investments. They can be investments either in things like expanding production capacity, expanding factories, mergers and acquisitions, loan finance, stuff like that. They can also be investments in the digital area. So how you can invest to move online and to digitally transform your company. And I started my consulting career back in 1992. And, since then, I've kind of been following these 2 tracks where the digital world really took off after 1995 and the launch of the Netscape Navigator, the world's first commercial web browser. But at the same time, I followed this whole wave of investment, which went into Central and Eastern Europe and Russia and the new independent states after the fall of communism. And I've really seen firsthand how, companies that are in the food processing sector or otherwise supplying large retail chain organizations, how packaging is really, really, really revolutionized. I mean, we went from a very primitive packaging situation in the 1980s to a very sophisticated one today. But the result is, and ironically, the digital economy has definitely played a role in this, with things like, the rise of food deliveries and stuff like that. We're now spending billions and billions and billions on packaging. So if you order food at home, you've probably seen this. If you do takeout, if you go to a supermarket and you buy a can of beans and it's in like a 2-pack can and it's got shrink wrapping around it, you can tell just how huge the role of, consumer convenience is.
Yeah.
And conversely, what an environmental burden it is. I mean, when we consume plastic, we're basically consuming petroleum.
Hmm.
And people are complaining about a high petroleum price right now and a high oil price and high gas prices. That is due to consumption. I mean, we're consuming it, therefore the price is going up.
Yeah.
When we consume products which are shipped, in corrugated packaging boxes or wrapped in paper, the good news is a lot of that is recycled. I mean, I have clients who are recycling roughly. I have corrugated packaging companies that roughly 95% of their feedstock is recycled paper, and that's
Hmm.
very, very advantageous, basically. But the fact is, our population is growing, our economic sophistication is growing, our consumer economies are growing, and that means there's a huge demand for packaging. And sadly, that also means that there is, a much greater risk of pollution and also natural resource depletion. And
Hmm.
these are facts that, as our population is going to hit 8 billion quite soon,
Yeah.
um, you know, these things are only going to accelerate, basically, despite the move towards biodegradable packaging, despite ESG, environmental social governance policies, corporate social responsibilities. I mean, no matter what, we're moving in one direction, basically. And as
Sure.
populations migrate towards cities, especially in the developed world, this is only going to increase, basically.
Are there differences
So
in awareness or understanding of what plastics consumption means, for example, in East European markets versus the EU, for example?
I don't want to generalize. I think anyone who visits a city, say in Russia, and visits a city in Germany is going to see differences in terms of things like
Hmm.
recycling networks, environmental awareness in terms of separating trash at the point of consumption and the collection
Hmm.
point, methods of garbage disposal. So yeah, I think definitely there's definitely a different perception in terms of how, especially municipalities and communities, organize garbage disposal, and then also how, for example, people are taught about garbage disposal.
Yeah.
Um, but we do have a long way to go. We definitely have a long way to go. I'm happy to say that again, if you go to cities in, say, Belgium or Germany or Sweden, you see a very
Hmm.
high awareness and very
Yeah.
organized systems, and a very high percentage of refuse which is collected and recycled. And the European Union is definitely contributing to that because it passes, regulations and directives, which gives us an objective of how much of that, what our recycling targets should be, what our carbon mitigation strategies and carbon
Hmm.
emission targets should be, and so on and so forth. And that's being done at the collective level. And I think these are, positive initiatives. At the end, it's again, you need the sense of personal responsibility. And if you can translate that personal responsibility into a form of collective responsibility at the level of a municipality or a neighborhood,
Hmm.
that's really where you start getting great results. So I
Wow.
don't believe solely in legislating. I
Hmm.
believe that, a lot of this has to be because of character and personal ethics. And I'm really happy to see a lot of communities, all over Europe are moving in that direction. And again, I
Yeah.
think, this the initiative that we're talking about today is a great example of that. That there is no collective law you can pass about pollution in the world's oceans. There's no
Hmm.
governing authority for that. There's no, you can't wave a legal wand and have a law which will solve the problem. You have to
Yeah.
have volunteer efforts and personal initiative
Well,
and personal contribution.
I really like what I'm hearing here, Philip, because having spoken to my colleagues from my graduate school, Thunderbird, I spoke to Leah Colabello and Richard Brubaker. Leah is originally from Hawaii, and she's based in the United States, and then Richard Brubaker is based in China. It's very interesting to hear from all three of you a very similar theme. First of all, collective responsibility, ethical responsibility. You know, these are all very important elements that contribute of what I call a triad. You've got the consumer, you've got the NGOs slash organizations, and then you've got government as well, not to mention manufacturers as well of petroleum-based products that are used to make any type of plastics. the overall theme, my understanding is, the percentage escapes me, but the bottom line is we're not doing enough. And the question then is, what do we need to do more of? And I guess we could categorize that in terms of what the governments need to do more of, what NGOs or organizations need to do more of, the consumer as well, and ultimately businesses, i.e. manufacturers as well. The percentages are very, very low. I mean, we're talking in the United States, the the amount of recycling or reusability of products is still like low, I dare say 20%. I mean, that might even still be too much. I need to go back to see what Leah was telling me, but there's a lot of work to be done still. And it is encouraging, of course, to see people like yourselves for years now taking that initiative to actually create the awareness at a very local level. And that's what Richard Brubaker was telling me last week, that a lot of it has to come down to the municipal level, whether it's collecting of refuse, trash, etc., to local organizations that take an active role in getting rid of plastic, for example, from various rivers, seas, etc. What do you think needs to be done to increase that awareness? Are we still talking about a paradigm shift? Is it more education? Obviously, the likes of influencers is very important, and in channels like YouTube as a platform, it's testament to the power of community of a younger generation, as you've mentioned. But I'm just questioning, what else could we do more of?
Yeah, well, I think we have to do more of everything. I mean, we have to look, first of all, at the entire value chain, because so far we've been talking about collecting and recycling garbage, and, of course, splitting that into components like, paper, aluminum, glass, plastic, and so on and so forth. But, the dirty secret is that for years, we're very proud of our recycling capability in Europe, but we do the collection, but we don't necessarily actually recycle everything. Instead, what was happening for decades now is we were bundling these products and then simply exporting them to China and, letting China take care of the problem. Well, China passed a law, I don't remember now how many years ago, 4 years ago, something like that, saying that, they're no longer taking a lot of these materials. And so where have they been winding up? They've been winding up in the landfills. And that's a particular problem that we have in Cyprus. We don't have primary, industrial processing of the waste after it's actually been collected. So we need to look at the whole value chain. On the one hand, we need to look at the demand and how can we re-engineer packaging on the one hand to make it biodegradable, and on the other hand, actually, we're just having a big earthquake right now in Limassol. The whole apartment is shaking.
Is that right?
It's quite interesting.
Oh my gosh! I hope you're safe.
Yeah,
that is crazy. I mean, it kind of feels like when you're watching the mainstream media, suddenly you get similar scenarios. So I'm quite intrigued by that.
The whole apartment is just shaking right now.
Oh my! Oh my! Oh my!
So just looking at that value chain, and then there's got to be a discussion between citizens and industry on what is this role of consumption. How are we going to consume? I mean, we have maximized the efficiency of consumption on the basis of a four-person family, typically urban or suburban. A weekly trip to the supermarket, plastic bags, primary packaging, transport packaging, et cetera, et cetera. But my feeling is, we're really reaching the end of that model, and either we're going to need a way on the primary production side to seriously look at packaging and try to figure out what is an acceptable alternative to make sure that, that the goods that we produce are put on the supermarket shelves, they travel there safely, hygienically, and they can be bought by consumers, taken home and consumed. But then also on the recycling side, what are we going to do with actually all of this waste, and how are we going to make sure it's not just landfilled, but maybe it can be, actually recycled and used for something better. And there are thousands of initiatives on both sides of the equation. So both on the industrial production of packaging and also on the recycling. I'm happy to say that there's a lot of research and development going on. There are a lot of startups. There's a lot of material science, and so on and so forth. But I think above all, we need to cast light on this, and we just need to say that, look, this is a problem, but it's a manageable problem. I mean, it's up to us to decide, to set some targets, and to try to figure out what kind of world we want to live in. And in 5 years, what change do we want? In 10 years, what change do we want? And what type of a world do we want to live with our kids?
Sure.
Certainly, I don't want to leave them a world which is knee deep in trash. I mean, this is acceptable by any means.
Yeah.
And then we've got the additional problem that when we look at where the waste ends up, the oceans are turning into depositories of waste, and it's not just plastic or fishing gear or things like that. There are two far worse things. The first is organic phosphates and the byproducts of agriculture. So if you look at closed seas like the Mediterranean Sea, say like the Black Sea, or like where we grew up, the Corinthian Gulf around there, these are enclosed seas, and there's a lot of agricultural runoff which takes place, and the sea is poisoned, literally. I mean, it becomes deoxygenated, so there are algal blooms, there's anaerobic activity which takes place, and it literally kills, the native
marine life.
Biology and marine life of the area. The other problem, of course, is that oceans are a carbon sink. So, I mean, we're producing vast quantities of carbon dioxide. It's not just going into the atmosphere, it's being absorbed by the oceans. And when this happens, the oceans become more and more acidic because you are taking the carbon out, you're combining it with hydrogen, and you're forming acid. And when that happens, microorganisms like plankton, they cannot live, basically. And if the plankton population collapses, that means we're basically going to destroy the entire chain of marine life. So, it affects the small basis of the food chain, and then it goes all the way up to whales, to the largest mammals and animals in the ocean. So we have this problem. It's a bit like the 18th century economics problem, the problem of the commons in England. How do you manage a shared resource where, you can put your sheep to graze on the commons, but if you enclose them and if you turn them over to agricultural development, then, the small farmers don't have a place to graze their sheep, basically. And we're kind of in an equivalent situation. We were saying, okay, we're going to landfill our garbage on land, and we're going to bury it, and it's going to sit there literally for hundreds and thousands of years. Earthquake aftershock.
Oh my God.
Funny.
My God.
But then in the oceans, we're essentially taking the same strategy. We're saying, look, no one has ownership of the oceans beyond, say, a 12-mile, coastal zone area.
Yeah.
So you literally have examples of waste disposal companies, taking garbage out on barges and dropping it beyond the 12-mile line. This is criminal.
So I was going to ask you, do you think that this is actually done on purpose? And you've just answered my question.
Well, yeah, of course. And there's, if you look at, there's a lot of stories of like how radioactive waste has been disposed. And if you look at some of the countries in the Mediterranean, especially some of our neighboring countries, you know that for years they've been giving contracts to garbage disposal firms, which literally put this stuff on a barge, truck it out into the middle, say, of the Adriatic Sea, and then just sink it. And I mean, it's hard to imagine a more self-destructive or stupid activity. So, beyond this light of plastic, which disturbs us because, it ruins the natural environment, it kills marine life, all of the reasons we talked about, we also have these two, very big other problems. The fact that, the oceans are a carbon sink, and the fact that no one is really regulating what is disposed in them. So again, I think you're doing a great initiative, and we really need to call attention to that.
When we're talking about plastic in particular, another recurring comment is that plastic is in fact something that has really taken consumerism to new levels, historically speaking, meaning it's been a very beneficial form of packaging, if you will. It's what's allowed us to have perishable goods last longer, for example, and that's really benefited society. And yet, once we find a solution to one problem, we create another problem, and that's another common comment that I've heard as well. And so, if we're talking about alternatives to plastic, we're looking at companies. I'll give you an example. I used to be a Herbalife distributor, and the products that are being created these days are packaged in new types of paper bag type products or packaging that can be ziplocked. Now, one might say that Ziploc is plastic in and of itself, and yet, or the lining of the container is plastic too, but we're probably going to argue that the packaging uses less plastic. And yet, if we were to go in the direction of fully corrugated type of packaging, are we creating other problems as well? I mean, one problem solved will create another problem eventually. It's kind of the comment that I've heard recurring.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, no one is saying that we're going to eliminate packaging, right? Packaging is totally valuable in our supply chain. It's really a safeguard of economic activity. And, ideally, it's hard to imagine a world where there's not going to be primary and transport packaging. Let me just leave it at that, basically. But the question is, can we, on the one hand, make it either more lightweight or more biodegradable? And on the other hand, can we introduce some public policy measures that maybe give people a value for recycling it? So, for example, you've heard that in the EU has recently passed legislation on those plastic supermarket bags that you get at supermarkets. And as a result of that, supermarkets have now started to charge for the bags. What's amazing is that in the Corinthian Gulf, where I go on my vacation, our beach used to be full of plastic bags. There are now no more plastic bags. In fact, the type of packaging you see most of all are plastic bottles. And ironically, Greece has not yet passed a law on plastic bottle deposits, but in countries like Lithuania, where they have, the amount of bottles which are being trashed and landfilled has gone down radically. So what happens in a country like, I believe, Germany, I know definitely for glass, France for glass, I'm not sure, plastic, Lithuania definitely for plastic, there's a small deposit on the bottle, so that when you go to the supermarket, you're going to pay like, say, €1 for the product, 5 cents for the packaging, and then they have these machines at every retail point, and you can go and you can put them back in, and you get the 5 cents back. So I mean, this is like a very, very simple type of public policy initiative, which at very low cost can do a tremendous, can have a tremendous impact, at least on the collection and recycling. Yeah. The question then is, though, is this actually recycled or is it landfilled?
And this leads me to my next question. It's basically, as a consumer, how can I be confident of what happens to the trash or the waste that I dispose of? I mean, you've got these bins with 4 different slots: organic matter, plastic, paper, and boxes. And there's a lot of great initiatives locally where recycling and reusability is initiated, but then as a consumer, I'm questioning, well, does it actually go to where it's supposed to end up? Or is it, I don't know, whatever, is it processed in a way that's going to reduce carbon emissions or reduce plastics, etc.?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know very well that in the countries where I live, in Greece and Cyprus, we've had big problems with, the breakdown on the industrial processing side of recycled materials, with the result that they were either landfilled or they were simply consolidated and sold globally, as waste. And they were sold to countries which had then either incinerators or they had the industrial infrastructure to actually recycle. Like I said, with the close of China and with China's policy changes, I literally don't know what happens to the packaging when I drop it in the recycling bin. I imagine that in a larger country, or in a country like Switzerland, say where you are, or a country like
Yeah.
Germany, I imagine, or France, there is an industrial infrastructure, and so companies are able to actually recycle the materials and then reuse them. But I cannot guarantee that. I don't know of anyone who can actually guarantee it, and it's
I
a
mean, we
great
get
question
into
to
the
ask.
realm of perception, and
Yeah.
how do we as end consumers perceive what happens to the waste that we dispose of? And I think in Greece, maybe the confidence levels of that is probably lower, I would chance
Yes.
to argue, than in Switzerland, for example.
Yes. Definitely. And
Now,
and that is fully, that's not a reflection on the country. That's a reflection on the organizational strength of the
on the organizational
municipality,
structure, yeah,
and
exactly.
the communal, the communes, and how actively and proactively they manage this function.
Yeah.
In Greece, one of the common problems that we have is that there's a lot of construction activity, and when people are done with their refuse, they simply drop it next to the garbage. So like you'll have your big green garbage bins, and then next
Yeah.
to it you might have a pile of bricks or dirt or whatever. In France, that's totally illegal. That's fined. You actually have to bring it to a specific point in your municipality, which will handle things like branches, leaves, dirt, brick, furniture, stuff like that. So
Some of
it's
my
purely a question.
experience in my international travels, for example, I was very impressed in Japan, where it's almost part of the DNA that if you have something to dispose of, any trash, especially if you go to some kind of a public event, a concert, or fireworks displays, people will take their
Yes.
foods, they'll take whatever it is, and then they will collect it and take it back home with them, which I found, for me, it was quite a reasonable and logical thing to do.
Yeah.
Other things that I've also witnessed in my travels, especially living here in Switzerland, in my opinion, the level of confidence in what happens to waste, I believe things are done to it that should be done. And in
Yes.
particular, there's even what I call the garbage police. There are
Hmm.
people from the municipality that actually go and check the contents of refuse bags, believe it or not. I know
Yes.
of
Yeah.
expats that have been fined for having
Hmm.
thrown the wrong trash in the wrong bag, for example.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
although this sounds comical and maybe a little bit pedantic, believe it or not, some form of policing actually does occur. Now, I wish I could say the same for Greece, for example. I mean,
It all comes
yeah,
down to the values, and we can say that the Swiss approach is comical, but at the same time, the Swiss have fought for their independence, and they have learned how to live together as a confederation of
yeah,
communities, basically, and communities surrounded by a very warlike continent, basically. So
yeah,
the
exactly.
fact that they have developed these rules over time, and the fact that they emphasize the communal, um, you know, values in a way that's admirable. In
Absolutely,
Greece,
yeah.
we have a slightly different approach. We've also been in a very warlike neighborhood, a very unstable neighborhood.
Hmm.
But what strikes me is that we had this huge migration from after World War II, from the
Yeah.
villages and the rural areas to the major cities, to the extent that a single city is now roughly 40% of our population.
Hmm.
And there's no single municipal authority for that entire area. It's in fact carved into probably 60 different municipalities in
Yeah.
Attica, if I have my numbers correct.
It's quite a
And
lot.
that means that there's no common approach, there's no
Yeah.
synergies, there's no standardization. And if you take like the municipality where I live, which is quite small, it doesn't have a garbage disposal network. It doesn't even have a sewage network. We're still using septic tanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Switzerland is a lot further ahead than we are in
Yeah.
terms of what does it mean to be in living in a neighborhood, and what does it mean to respect the rules which have been developed for everyone's benefit. And
Yeah.
this to an American, this may sound like heresy, right? This may sound
Mm-hmm.
like don't tread on me. I want
Yeah.
my own rules. I
Yeah.
don't want anyone else making rules for myself,
Yeah.
for me. But at the end of the day, the rules are there to try to help you and to try to help all of us communally. And at one point, either we're going to have to accept that, garbage is this problem which goes beyond borders, it goes beyond our municipal borders or our
Mm-hmm.
family's borders, it affects everyone, or not. And I think it's literally as simple as that. It's an economic problem that needs to be addressed,
Yeah.
and we need to develop the rules, and hopefully the rules can be based on individual respect
Mm-hmm.
and self-respect, not
Philip,
not penalties and fines, and not that
yeah.
aspect.
I mean, I think really one recurring idea that comes back to me at the moment, for instance, is ultimately we need to take responsibility. And as consumers, we need to take certain steps. So let me ask you this. What things do you do to minimize, in this case, plastic waste?
Okay, so I was horrified during lockdown
Yeah.
because I realized I was ordering more and more, delivery, food being delivered. And I realized that my personal garbage, consumption and production was just skyrocketing, basically. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to cook food in batches. So to avoid, to avoid ordering every single meal, which comes in, a lot of plastic and paper waste. I enjoy cooking, so that's not a problem. It's mainly a problem of organization. I need to organize my week so that I know when I'm going to go shopping, when I will cook, what type of stuff I'm going to get to have a balanced meal, and so on and so forth. And I'm literally doing everything I can just to reduce, so like stuff like this bottle here, right? One of the simple
Mm-hmm.
things I did was like one of those office coolers, and I have people delivering those big 20-liter water
Yeah.
things. I think the next step is simply going to switch over to water filtration, because I think that's
Mm-hmm.
probably even a better system than what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But I'm doing everything I can to minimize my consumption, and especially any kind of consumption which relies, on packaging. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's simple micro changes. If I go to the
Yeah.
supermarket or to the store now, I always take a backpack with me, and I've got a couple of IKEA bags, and I take those
Mm-hmm.
with me. I don't need to rely on, say, plastic bags or whatever.
Yeah.
I avoid stuff which is, one-off, just like, uh, like just consumption, which is not absolutely necessary. And the other thing is I'm a bit wary of my carbon footprint. So
Mm-hmm.
I have literally been thinking of investing in a farm type concept whereby,
Okay.
a group of people could commission a farmer to produce for us and then do deliveries
Mm-hmm.
twice a week or something like that. And again,
Yeah.
using eco-friendly packaging, and really just trying to get food which is as fresh as
Mm-hmm.
possible, as seasonal as possible, and as close by, so we don't have this huge,
Yeah. I,
carbon footprint,
I
basically.
think you really gave a very good example here. And admittedly, I'm also encouraged by certain initiatives in Greece, especially in the last years of let's call it the brain drain, where since we had the crisis in Greece, lots of Greeks were leaving Greece. But the ones that stayed behind, you saw a lot of migration of younger people, I believe, moving into the countryside of Greece to live a
Yes.
more eco-friendly life. And I was encouraged to discover that there is a sort of collective, as you've described it, of farmers that empower you as a consumer to have a patch of land which you in essence rent, and they
Yes. Yeah.
grow produce or vegetables and so forth for you on their piece of land, and they deliver that to you.
Yeah.
And I really like that as a concept, And as Greeks, we've always been, let's just the popular markets, the laiki, is something that's always
Yes.
been
Exactly.
very much
Yeah.
ingrained in our culture, and so to see farmers making these initiatives to help urbanites get their fresh vegetables from a patch of land somewhere outside of the city, for me was very encouraging. Further to
Yeah.
that, I was also encouraged about the social goodwill that exists in Greek society, especially in moments of difficulty. And you see a lot of the larger media companies actively promote these sort of activities, and you've got this collective sense of goodwill in Greece, especially for the less fortunate inhabitants of urban areas. So there are a lot of pockets of good examples of things that are taking place. And here in Switzerland in particular, you also have local farms that deliver directly to your door in their little baskets, which may be made of plastic, but they leave your vegetables at the front door. You leave the
Mm-hmm.
basket, they come and they pick it up again, and so they reuse that again, which
Reusable.
is a great
Yes. Yeah.
initiative. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I am encouraged, and these are the sort of practices that I like to implement as well. I've learned some interesting, like you just mentioned about buying jugs of water. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
very good practice because you're basically using a jug of water and then you give it
Yeah.
back so that they can
Yeah.
refill it again. So that's a
That's right.
very good
It's
example
reusable.
of a good
Mhm.
initiative.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately we need to take personal responsibility. We've
Hmm.
gone too far on the road of convenience, and I think the pendulum is now swinging a little bit in the other direction.
Hmm.
So we have all benefited tremendously from these global supply chains, and
Yeah.
by the fact that in it, you remember growing up in Greece, if you went to a supermarket, 95% of what you would find would be produced in Greece. It wouldn't be the best quality,
Hmm.
but it would be fine, right? We were fine. We,
Yeah.
we didn't have any
We're
problem.
still alive.
Yeah. Today, okay, you go to a supermarket, you've got a much higher SKU count, you have products from all
Yeah.
over the world, and that's fine, that's great. But if you go to a supermarket in Greece, you're going to find garlic produced in China.
Mm.
Why can't we have garlic produced in Greece?
Well, I know a few places in Greece that do produce some very good garlic, right?
Yeah, yeah, but the
Yeah.
the purchasing function of these large retail organizations says, okay, where can we get consistent delivery
Hmm.
in quantity? And it comes from China, or like we import tomatoes from the
Yeah.
Netherlands
Yeah.
because it's a greenhouse based production system, which means you've
That's
got
right.
very stable, very predictable, and uniform quality outputs every day, and
Hmm.
we don't have that. So
Yeah.
I think we really need to focus attention on what we're doing individually and the purchase decisions we make individually. It's a journey which once you start, you don't really stop because you keep seeing how much further you can go and how much more you
Yeah.
can optimize. But I think it's time we start doing that because the current system is definitely easy, but it has very suboptimal results. I mean,
One
it's
of
not
the
a
comments that I really enjoyed hearing from my colleague Leah Colabello was she basically said, vote with your wallet. In other
yes,
words,
yeah,
you've seen, even in Greece, we've had several types of boycotts in the past. If you remember the time with the stories around feta cheese, the Greek
hmm,
society as a whole boycotted feta that was not made in Greece, and they voted with their wallet. There's no reason why you couldn't do the same when it comes to products that are delivered in plastic packaging.
yeah,
And my friend Leah went so far as to say that, yeah, you can vote with your wallet, and even so, bring the plastic back to the supermarket so that they can
hmm,
dispose of it and give it back to the manufacturers or the packagers.
yes,
Having said that, one good example is here in Switzerland in particular. Lots of supermarkets, or pretty much every supermarket that I've been to, have a facility that take back all of the used plastic that you may have in your household. And I find that to
yes,
be a great service. The only inconvenience, and here's the inconvenience factor, is that you need to haul it to the supermarket yourself, right?
right,
And dispose of it.
right.
But that's a small inconvenience to think of because you have to go back to the supermarket anyway, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. No, it's just I think that's exactly the right approach. It's just,
Mm,
small decisions which are also purchase decisions and are informed.
hmm.
And the more we can move in this direction, I think the better, I hope the better the results will be for our planet, for our
Yeah,
environment, for our local economies. But we all need to be involved. It's
I
just not
think
something you can ignore any longer.
absolutely. And in the spirit of being involved, I think the next level up, in my opinion, is it has to start with the consumer being able to push back up the supply chain. And
Hmm.
then it
Hmm.
also has to come down to the companies that actually market their products. And I think marketers around the world also need to do their bit to educate. In other words, the marketers need to take the vision of the companies that are out there to educate consumers on what their brand really means, going so far as having a story to tell,
Hmm.
telling about their values, their system, the philosophy. You see a lot of examples of, let's just call them green companies today, even when you're looking at the
Hmm.
alternative type food products made of
Yeah.
plant-based protein, etc. I think the
Yeah.
marketing behind all that is great as well. But let's not forget that some of the marketing might be misleading. If you talk about McDonald's greening their arches, for example, there's a lot of debate around that as well, and many other fast food restaurants who, I mean, this is probably more towards, what's defined as healthy fast food, for example, right?
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
concept,
Hmm.
in my opinion, still boils down to marketers having a story to tell that is actually in favor of educating the public. And we've got one of our viewers here, Gabriela Libiano, who says, please let's teach children how to take care of our planet. And I think we're not far from the truth there. In fact, it's also up to us as adults to teach children about how to correctly dispose of or consume packaged goods, in this particular case, plastic. So there's definitely a
Yeah.
lot of work to be done. Philip,
Totally
I've
agree.
really
But I think
enjoyed
we're
this conversation. Do you have any last points to tell us?
no, just I think we're at the best point now in our history to do so, to change. I'm
Hmm.
very encouraged by the messages I get from younger people, from
Yeah.
the much maligned millennials. I think they're actually much more environmentally conscious than we are, and they have
Hmm.
in some cases, a much more positive attitude towards brands and towards consumerism than we do.
Yeah.
Um, I think you and I mean, we're Generation X. And we came from a different part of the world than the mainstream. So our consumption journey, if you will, has been one where we've gone through all of the processes, right?
Hmm.
We've really been knee deep in packaging and in consumerism for a lot of
Yeah.
our lives, and that's been the definition of success, in a way that you have a family, you go to the supermarket, you buy, you consume, et cetera,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. And I think I'm encouraged a lot by the way younger people are going. I know, for instance, Greta Thunberg is attracting a lot of
Yeah.
negative comments, but I totally approve on what she's doing, and I totally approve the message she's trying to get out. That as a young person, she is screaming mad about the
Hmm.
apathy that other people, including our generation and our
Yeah.
politicians, have about this issue. So I think it's
Mm.
great that you're doing this campaign. I really thank you for it, and I just hope we can all do a lot more in
It's
the
lots of
coming
fun,
years.
and for me, this has
It
been an
is.
educational journey talking to subject matter experts like yourself and my other two colleagues previously. And if you're watching this video all the way up to, if you're watching this recording up to this point, there's more information in the description in the box below where you can find some resources from my former colleagues who are very active in sustainability. And when we're done with this live stream and you watch this replay, we'll have some information that Philip may provide us on more information on plastic pollution sustainability. Philip, you've really given us a lot of great points of view that are very much in line with the discussions I've had previously. And it's time for you guys to do your part as well. If you are interested in helping support the Team C's initiative, please make sure to go to teamseas.org and become a team player. Join the team, make a donation. Every little penny or every little dollar, every little amount will help contribute to the disposal of plastic in seas, rivers, and oceans. And what's great is that the initiatives taken by the likes of Mr. Beast, also known as Jim Donaldson and Mark Rober, it's really made a lot of impact. It's been showcased in the mainstream media as well, and it's just the proof that the power of community, and we're talking the YouTube community, is actually able to make change. And if you're not a member of the YouTube community, you just happen to be watching this video, maybe your local community also has certain types of organizations or groups of people, just like Philip has, who've taken the initiative to go down to the local beach, go down to the local lake, river, and help clean things up. And if you are going to go out for a barbecue, if you are going to go out and watch a fireworks display, or whatever it is that you do, just pick up your own trash. It's not difficult to do, and it's a very good practice to have, regardless of what part of the world you're in. And I think this is, for me at least, something I'm very passionate about, just like yourself, Philip. I spent a lot of time by the sea when I was a kid, and I still want to do that. And we need to think about children in the future, children today, lead by example. And I think you're a perfect example of that, Philip, and I really commend you on your interest and also for having taken the time to join us today. So guys, make sure you do your best to contribute. Teamseas.org is the website that you want to go to. Make a donation. Find out more about what Team Seas does. I'll be coming back with some live broadcasts in the coming weeks again every Friday. And I'll be doing a recap of the things that I've learned along my journey. I'll even give you a list of the things that I've started to implement or re-implement to make my contribution to supporting the campaign and generally the avoidance of plastics in our ecosystem. And I'll also give you some insights to what other creators on YouTube are doing to support the campaign, not to mention a little bit more insight on the actual machines that these two conservancy companies are doing to clean up plastic in our seas, rivers, and oceans. Philip, σε ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ, φίλε μου. I'm really happy that you are here. I hope you don't have any more problems with earthquakes. We do live in a seismic area when we're down in Greece or Cyprus, but I'm sure you'll be fine. Thank you very much again, Philip. It's been great. Just as a last comment, where can people find out more about you?
So my website, philipammerman.com.
Okay, philipammerman.com. We'll put that information in the description box below. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'll be coming back with a lot more information that's YouTube and video marketing related, not to mention my personal interest in this Team Seas campaign. For now, I just want to wish you all a very, very good weekend. Philip, thank you very much again. We'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
And we'll see each other soon. Take care.
Great. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.